Welcome to A Wealthy Life. And in this episode, I'm going to be talking to you about the 6 types of sharks there are swimming in the property sea and how you could fall prey and become 2 of those types of sharks and how to avoid it. I use the term shark because that's money shark, loan shark. It's somebody bad in business, someone bad dealing with money. And really, if you're going to get into property investing with all the negativity there is about how bad landlords are, why not just get in and become a good landlord, an exemplar, ethical, if we want to use that word, and create a property business that benefits you, your family, and generations to come, but is also there to provide a decent home for your decent tenants and is a business that you have set up so that it runs easily, smoothly, makes a profit, is tax efficient, and above all is time efficient so that you can live the wealthy life you want. Listen on. If you have any questions or you'd like to know more, please do book a call, as I would be delighted to have a chat with you about your plans or the problems that you're facing. My name is Vicky O'Shea, and we're going to be talking about sharks, not just because I love scuba diving, but because probably in any business, I mean, there are bad taxi drivers, there are bad doctors, there are bad dentists, there are bad everybody. There's a lot of press about bad landlords. And so what we really don't want to be is a bad landlord. But equally, in that process of investing in property, we can come across other trades or businesses that we have to do business with, and they can equally be bad examples of their own marketplace. And so what I want to do is go through these 6 sharks for you and let you know how you can avoid becoming 2 of them. So one of the most interesting sharks, I think, is the vendor, probably sometimes the estate agent, right up there at the beginning of the buying process. What you have to remember when you're going to look at buying a property, even if it's a residential property, so be aware of that as well, that the vendor is looking to sell the property. They don't want it anymore. They want it gone. And the estate agent is looking to sell the property on behalf of the vendor because that's how they make their commission. Now, they're not working in league. Estate agents aren't corrupt. But what you have to remember about the estate agency role here is that they are a salesperson. Their job is to point out the highlights. So this is why whenever you watch an American TV program, you always have the estate agent come around and they're going, and the new light fixtures and the light in this room is wonderful. And you could see yourself sitting here with your family. And this is the perfect place for the dining room. They're helping you imagine how you can make use of this space. They're helping you understand maybe how you can make money in the space. The other thing is that when you do look at properties on Rightmove, for example, bear in mind that the picture you're seeing is not necessarily the truth. So in just the last 7 to 10 days, I viewed a property where all the pictures on Rightmove showed an empty, brand new property, but actually the property has been tenanted for over a year. So it looks nothing like the photos. And if that tenant chooses to move out in a year and I hadn't viewed it, I would be looking at a full redeck, at minimum of a carpet clean, probably some carpets to be replaced, and not a brand spanking new, done, ready to let property. Equally, if it was a brand spanking new, seemingly done, ready to let property, I would be looking at what is it that the vendor has hidden. Because a coat of paint hides a multitude of sins. Can you still smell that damp? And you know what I think about smelling properties. The other thing that you might find with a set of photos is the wide angle. And so you walk into a room expecting it to be 10 by 10, and actually you're lucky if it's 3 by 3 or 2 by 1 because of the angle of the camera, often on a selfie stick. You can see they're standing in the bath. So don't be taken in by the glossy pictures. don't be taken in by the glossy paintwork. And if, and we've had this as an experience, you are buying from a vendor who is an existing landlord and you're buying landlord to landlord, and I do that a lot, don't trust that landlord. Don't trust a landlord vendor, because why would they be selling a property if it was making them money? And you'll hear me talk about why would you sell a property a lot. There has to be a reason. So at the moment, the reason a lot of landlord vendors are selling is because they're in their personal names. And if you become part of a Wealthy Life community and in the inner circle, you'll start to hear the exclusive interviews that I've been doing with members of my team. Some of them are very experienced, both in the financial world and in the landlord world. And you'll hear them saying the same thing, that gradually what is happening is that landlords who have properties in their personal name, because of the impact of Section 24, which is where there is a difference in the way that tax is calculated, they're starting to gradually reduce the size of the personal portfolio that they're holding. Perfectly fine, a legitimate reason. But again, you're still going to fall back into that. As a landlord, you want to sell it. So you're going to put it in its best light. You might do a coat of paint, you might not, your choice. But if you're buying it with a tenant in situ, what you're assuming is that that tenancy is legal and that property is legal. We recently put an offer in and subsequently bought, after a whole kerfuffle, a property with a tenant in there. The tenant had a young child with learning disability under the age of 3. She was at home all the time in the home. She had an older son and her partner was at work. Ideal tenant, kept the house well, considered the house her home. When we asked, as you should do, and as you should receive, at the point where you put the offer in, you get the memorandum of sale, and you should receive, if there is, a tenancy, an electrical certificate, a gas certificate, and of course the EPC, the energy performance certificate, is already available online. So we asked for these documents. The gas came through, the electric had the wrong address on it. So we then went back to the estate agent and we asked for the correct electrical certificate. They then went off to the letting agent to ask for these documents. The electrical certificate just didn't materialise. Asked and asked and asked, nothing. We had the tenancy agreement. There were some questions there about how they had secured the tenancy. So now one of the things you really need to understand about the process, or have someone on your team that is helping you with this, is what constitutes a legal tenancy. And if you don't understand that, then I wouldn't be buying with a tenant in situ, because you could open yourself up to thousands, if not tens of thousands of pounds worth of liability, which really wasn't yours, was the previous landlord's, but you didn't check. The summary of this story: the tenancy, we managed to resecure the deposit. The tenancy was renewed when we took over and a brand new tenancy was written. All of the paperwork was presented correctly, and therefore we knew that it was now a legal tenancy. We had to redo the gas certificate because it turned out that it was a fake gas certificate. It looked perfectly fine, but when you actually checked into the background of it, which is one of the things that we do, it was conducted by somebody who did not have permission to carry out gas safety certificates. The electrical certificate never came through. Hold on a second. So that landlord had been renting a property to a tenant with no valid electrical certificate. That is a breach of the law, liable to thousands, tens of thousands of pounds worth of fines. When we carried out our electrical test, or we went round there to do the testing and to do the certificate, our electrician rang from the property to say, I need to condemn the electrics. I need the electricity board to come in because the power line coming into the property was not safe. When you then actually looked at the fuse board, there were ways that basically the little fingers in the property could get their fingers in there. It wasn't a secure and safe fuse board. The wires were wrong. There was trips, all sorts of stuff. We had to deal with that. Obviously, renegotiated the price to deal with it. And then the best of all, We said that there was some cracking outside and we were worried about the drains. They said there was no problem with the drains. Now, bear in mind that this is a legal contract signed via solicitors. We're now in a position where we said, right, well, we want a drain survey. Quite fine, I can organise it. In fact, it's Thursday today. I can get my guy round on Friday or Monday, subject to the tenant. And the landlord, the vendor, said no, he would use his people. So what he did was he used his people to get the drain survey done. When he submitted the report to us, what we didn't realise is that he'd left off the last 5 pages. The last 5 pages said that there was a collapsed drain, a collapsed run of drain. So it had got clogged up, it had fallen, and then the water wasn't flowing away properly. So basically the water would flow down the drain, and instead of continuing down the drain into the mains, it would then come out into what was effectively the back garden, and that would wash away the soil and eventually cause subsidence at the back of the house, which is why I'd noticed the cracking. Corrupt all the way through. So if you don't have in place, if you like, pre-purchase checks, then you're going to be in a position where you're vulnerable. And that's why, not to keep plugging the community, but of course, join the community. You can join the Wealthy Life community for free. As part of the inner circle, my clients have access to a brand new pre-purchase checklist that we are going through and that we do on all of the purchases that I source for my clients. But what I wanted to do was have this as a conscious and overt process that my clients can see. And so also my mentees can use this in their purchases. So it's not really knocking estate agents because they are a vital part of the process, but be aware of their role. Their role is to sell a property because that is how they make their commission. And they're going to do the best job they can. And that's why you would go to an estate agent, to do the best job they could to sell the property for you. Probably the real shark in this story is the vendor. So more beware of them, but also still be aware of those estate agency pictures. And the agent is acting on behalf of the vendor. So that's number one. While we're talking about businesses that you will come across, let's talk about letting agents. And I'll stick with that same story. So the man, the landlord, selling that property with the tenant, with no gas certificate because it was fraudulent and no electrical certificate at all. The landlord was breaking the law, but he was using a letting agent that was complicit in this behavior. The letting agent is the managing agent on behalf of the landlord. That's why we go to them. That's why we use them. And when you employ a letting agent, you are saying to that letting agent, I want you to act on my behalf. I know I'm ultimately responsible, but you have got the training, the expertise. You do this all day, every day. You've got a 1,000 or more properties that you're managing. I want you to manage my property for me. And in that conversation, the assumption is, if you do full management, that you're going to collect the rent on time, that you're going to pay that rent over to me, that you are going to ensure that everything that is legally required as a landlord to let a property will be carried out. And that's from creating legal tenancies in the first place and doing all your due diligence on the tenant, right the way through to annual, 5-year, etc. checks to make sure that certificates are in place. And that if I get you to do this as well, that you're also going to respond to any repair questions and claims that come through from the tenants. So this letting agent did not hold a valid electrical certificate for the vendor. He did not have a valid gas certificate. The property had exposed wires, which was dangerous to the children. You know, sockets hanging off the wall, lights hanging off the ceiling, that the tenant had reported that the letting agent either hadn't passed on to the vendor or the vendor had said no, they didn't want to pay for the work. And the letting agent should have said to them, because those are high risk repairs that need dealing with. So there's that issue. I've also had in the past, and yes, this was on my one and only foreign investment, where my English speaking, English passport holding foreign letting agent collected the rent beautifully, but didn't give it to me. So that can happen. And I've also had a situation with a London well-known chain of letting agents that franchise out their various offices. Worked with one of those who, because it was a well-known name, I sort of assumed that there would be a level of, I don't know, credibility, good behavior, service. It turns out that they had created an illegal tenancy. It wasn't clear at the time because the gas certificate wasn't given to the letting agent on day one. The letting agent didn't carry out all of the prescribed paperwork at the point of the AST, the Assured Short Hold Tenancy, being signed. So my tenant was there under an illegal tenancy agreement. Marvelous. And then when it came around to the second year, can you believe this? They, for whatever reason, employed a gas safety engineer who, for whatever reason, didn't go to the house and actually carry out the gas safe checks or the service that I was charged for on the boiler. And we know that because at the time, the tenants were working from home and they never left the house. There was no way. There was one 15-minute window when the tenant was having a shower, when theoretically the gas man let himself in the property, carried out the gas safety check, did the service and left in that 15 minutes on a boiler that was running the shower that the tenant was under. So completely not possible. Created a totally fictitious gas certificate. And when you started to look at the two gas certificates, you could see that where they get into the detail of the sockets and the fuses in the fuse board, the words were different. So unless you've got someone on your side doing that level of due diligence, and I am so fortunate, and again, you'll get to meet her in the inner circle, to be working with Sue Smith as my letting agent. She is an investor herself. She's been running her letting agent business for years. She's worked in estate agents. She's got so many qualifications and so many years of experience. She can do the pricing. She understands the structural. She finds solutions to things. She knows the stories that we're going to go through in terms of the weird and wonderful situations that she's got unwitting, inexperienced landlords out of because of dealing with either, well, primarily a bad letting agent, because if you've got a bad tenant, it's because of a bad letting agent. So letting agents are your number two shark. Now, there are good ones out there, there are bad ones out there. You need to interview them and don't get emotionally involved. I had one of my clients where I was aware that the letting agent in a particular area that we were operating in, again, very well-known name in the property circuit, had moved on to bigger and better things, taken their eye off of the ball of their letting agent that we were using, and the service level dropped. So I found a new letting agent that I was happy with, and I asked all of my clients to move. All bar two did, and those two experienced problems. I think the thing is that if you're working with a sourcing agent or a professional agent like myself, that if I say to you, you need to move away from this letting agent for a reason, you absolutely do. Don't allow your emotions to be involved. One of my clients was very fond of the letting agent and they were a lovely person, but they were just not up to standard. And that's where the risk is. If your letting agent is not up to standard, they are acting on your behalf on matters regarding the law for which there are heavy financial penalties. So beware. You'll probably know where I'm going with this one now. So shark number 3 are deal sources. I think in the past, what I would say was that there were a lot of techniques out there that were dodgy. And the best one I had in all my years, and you won't have come across this, was the idea that you could do a lease option. So a lease option is where you sign a contract with someone who wants to sell their house, but instead of buying the house, effectively you sort of take out the option that you will buy it at some point in the future. So they feel more comfortable. So you're complete on the sale later, but what you're going to do now is have the right, but not the responsibility to complete on that sale. So you secure a price today, and then you use that price in the future when the property prices have gone up in 5 or 10 years, and that enables you to get a mortgage at a higher price and then do things with the difference. Sometimes you share them, most of the time you profit from them. So there is nothing in that contract except a piece of paper that says, if you want to, you could go ahead and buy this property in the future. And the homeowner is sitting there thinking, well, I can stay in the house, but in the future, someone's going to buy it from me. Great. There was a way that you could deal package these. So what you were actually packaging up was nothing, was thin air. And another way that they then expanded this was into rent to rents. So I would then find a property where the landlord didn't want the property anymore. So what I would do is I would sign a rent to rent agreement with the landlord that says, I will, in a sense, become the letting agent for this property. Are you all right with that? Yes. I would then sell this on to somebody else on the idea that they could turn it into an HMO, house of multiple occupancy. And I would then sell that deal for something like 6 grand. 6 grand works out at 500 a month. That 500 a month would come out of the profit that the unsuspecting rent to rent landlord would be making by servicing these properties. So getting the tenants in, getting all of the property up to standard, so all of the refurb, when the tenants leave, do the tenants changeover, etc., all that sort of stuff. That would be their profit of basically being a full-time landlord, a letting agent, and I would take 6 grand up front as a fee for passing on that deal. In fact, I met someone who came to me with one of their calls, and at that point they'd already paid, I think it was either 56 or 60,000 pounds to get 5 of these deals. So there is an agent out there that is taking 60 grand off of people and then going out there and finding them deals. And when I went back to them, I think it was 4, 5, 6 months later, they still didn't have their first deal. And my point was, you've just given over 60 grand, you have nothing to show for it. But there are people out there that will sell you something that they call is a deal that is not a deal. And there are lots of properties out there at the moment where they are saying, this is a fantastic opportunity for an HMO, or, of course, the trending technique at the moment is to rent out to social housing. We've been doing that for years. It is complex. It requires your mortgage lender to know. It requires your insurance broker to know. There are very specific conditions associated with renting properties to people through social housing deals with either your local council, the government, or bodies such as Serco. Deal sources aren't telling vulnerable investors all of the facts, or they're saying, and the classic one I saw obviously on Facebook was, I think it was a 2nd or 3rd floor flat, 2-bed flat that could be rented out as an HMO or for serviced accommodation, for social housing. How, if it's social housing and someone's got needs, so they're either going to be a family or they're going to be have a disability, because you're not going to get social housing unless you have some need. How is that person going to cope on a 2nd, 3rd floor flat? How is a 2-bed going to be turned into an HMO? And hold on a second, it's a flat. What does the lease say about whether you can have social housing tenants, whether you can have multiple tenants? And of course, that also applies to serviced accommodation and rent to rent. So you really have to understand what you're getting into. The sourcer has no, or a deal sourcer has no skin in the game. They are simply, I suppose it would be the same as going along to a farmer and I pick up a whole load of eggs. I don't know how old the eggs are. I don't know whether they're fresh, whether they're rotten. I don't even know whether they're cracked or not because I don't open the box. And then I'm just flogging on the box to you. I'm flogging on whatever label I stick on the box. And I'm going to say to you on the box that this is 6 fresh, free roaming, large eggs. And when you open it, there might be 3 eggs in there. There might be cracked eggs in there. When you break the eggs, they might be rotten. People are only looking at the shiny boxes that deal sources are putting out, and that's where the danger lies. What I would say the difference is that I'm not a deal sourcer. I work as a project manager for my clients to take them through the process from finding a property right the way through to getting that property rented and turning it into a property business. And I work with them all for a year after each individual house. So if you bought 2 properties from me in the first year, we will be working together for 2 years. And quite frankly, I'm still working with clients that bought properties from me back in 2012. A deal sourcer doesn't necessarily have any training, but more importantly, might not have bought any properties of their own. So be very aware of a deal sourcer. It's about volume for them. They're frequently, let's say, low fee. You're looking at 3 to 5 to 7 grand for a fee, but there's no extra service there. Or worse, they'll do it the whole way around, where they'll say, we'll do you the deal, but we'll do the property up with our own builders and you'll pay us for that, and we'll rent the property out, and my rental agency, my letting agency, will rent it for you and you'll pay for that, because then everything is in-house. No one is checking the market rent. No one is telling you whether that is a fair rent. And again, had another client who came to me where they said that they had got a deal to buy a property. They put down a deposit. They'd put down, I think it was 5 or 15 grand deposit on these flats. The flats were being marketed as a 1 bed for £950 a month. And at the time, the local housing allowance was £450 and the local market rent was £550. So how were they actually going to be able to pay this letting agent £950? Because they had elevated the price. So the property was on the market for a minimum of 25 grand more. If you then work out that increase on the rent all the way through, you can see how they were charging the investor more for the property, taking that surplus and then paying them back the extra 400 quid a month for 2 years, because that's what they did. They guaranteed 950 for 2 years. Well, when you come out the other end, not only are you going to be on a mortgage that might not sustain a loan at 450, and so you're going to be in trouble, or even 550, but you're then going to end up having a property that you're going to have to pay, that you're going to have to fund in. And that's not property investment. That's swimming with sharks. The other big shark swimming out there in the property sea are the trainers and the mentors. And again, I've said this to you before, so I'll just be brief. You need to check their CVs. You need to understand when they did their last deal, but also when did they do their first deal? Not a deal. When did they first buy a property? When was the last property they bought? So you can see the span of their experience. I bought my first property in 2004, and I bought my last property here in 2024, just the other month. How many deals have they done? How many properties have they bought for themselves? How many people have they gone on to successfully help become investors? Because I could fill a room with 100 people, but none of those people get enough information from me that they actually go ahead and do anything. And we know this, don't we? We've all done this. Shelf development, going along in the hype of the moment. When I did my property training, there were 60 to 80 people in a room every weekend doing these 3-day training courses. How many of those people are still around there out in the world? I could probably count them on 2 hands. And don't forget, that was not the same 60 people every weekend. Probably, I think we were looking at least 1,000 people in the pile each period that would rotate through every quarter. So we're looking at 4,000 people a year, of which definitely not 40 would have been successful. I would say you were looking at closer to 10 to 12 people having paid 20 grand to do this training, following through, because it's not right for everyone. But what happens is when you see these adverts, whether they're on Facebook or you go to people's websites, yeah, filled the room, hands in the way, isn't everything wonderful? But what you're not looking at is the success rate out the other side. And I know that there's someone out there, and a couple of people actually, that have the banners up that say, I can help you make £50,000 a year and a £500,000 portfolio in your first 12 months. And that was true for that one person who already showed up with £400,000 worth of cash. And yeah, it's easier if you've got a ton of cash to then go and buy. But if you're showing up and you've just got your first 100,000, it's going to take you a lot longer to get to that, especially when you're going to pay 20 grand out of that or more to get your training. And there's no guarantee that you're going to be successful because you're not training anymore with the person who did the original jazzy sales session. Your mentor will be somebody that they trained 9 times out of 10. So you really want to look at people who not only maybe have got all of the experience that you need, relevant experience that you need. So for example, if you came to me and what you want to do is property development, I haven't built houses, so I wouldn't be the right mentor for you. But I am able to work with you on your finances, on your mindset, certainly on buy-to-let, on HMO, and I have connections so that I could bring it in on the serviced accommodation and rent-to-rent if you decided to go that way. But above all, because of my business that I have been running since 2010, I can help you become a legitimate professional property sourcer and project manager for clients if that's the route you go. So you need to understand the CV of the people that you are about to hand over vast sums of money to, whether deal sourcing like the last shark or training or mentoring, and who you're going to get to work with at the tail end of this. There are 2 more sharks that I want to tell you about, and these could be you. So the first one that you could turn into is a greedy shark right at the very beginning of your journey into buying your first property or your second or your third. And what you'll hear a lot of people say is that you make money when you buy the house. So you need to buy low, and that's how you make money. That's how you increase your capital gain. But if you hold a property for long enough, you're going to get capital gain eventually anyway. You do want to buy your property at the right price. Absolutely. I believe you make money when you have managed your cash flow and your property well, that you've picked the right tenant and picked the right property so that you get cash flow on a monthly basis. That's when you've bought well, because you could screw someone down on the price, squeeze them on the price, but actually still end up only making £100 a month. That's not a good deal. So this is about not being a greedy shark. And what I just want to flag up is that if you push a vendor, and we're going to see more of these, whether it is landlords becoming repossessed or occasionally the homeowners becoming repossessed, at that point where they're still trying to sell out before they are fully repossessed and they are in financial difficulty, pushing them down that 10 grand off the purchase price means a 10 grand loss to the vendor. And if that doesn't cover their mortgage, or if that is their only profit, if you like, to enable them to move on to another property, then that's 10 grand to them. To you, it's 2.5 grand of cash. And yes, it's 7.5 grand increase in your mortgage, which is a slight loss on your cash flow. But look at that spreadsheet and look at that difference. But more importantly, Look what it does to your overall cash flow and your return on investment. And if it's a good deal, if you're getting excellent cash flow, which is what you should be getting, otherwise you wouldn't be buying it, and a great return, which is the net cash on cash return of the money that you're going to have to put into the property, don't lose the deal because you're a greedy shark. You can look up and find out what the mortgage is on the property. You can look up and find out when they bought the property. And when I was first starting, so for example, when I was looking at my deals in, let's say 2010 through to about 2016, I was very aware of the fact that property prices had peaked in 2007, just before they crashed in 2008. So if I looked up a property and I could see somebody had bought it before 2007, I'd know that they had paid a very high price for that property. I could see it. I could see the sold price. I could then work out, because I knew at the time that if they were residential, I could look at their loan to value. If they were an investor, I could look at the fact that they had probably got an 80% or maybe even 85% loan to value. I could take a good guess at their mortgage, even without doing all the other due diligence. And I could say to myself, okay, their asking price for this property is pretty close to what they paid for it. So there's only so far that I can push them. Is this a good deal now at this price? Does the deal work at the asking price? If the answer is yes, marvelous. Now I'm going to go that step further. And let's be honest, I am always going to push to a point where I get a no. I will always ask for that 10 grand off, for example, and get a no. But I wouldn't throw the deal away if I didn't get the 10 grand off. If I got 7.5 or I got 5 off, if that deal had worked for me at the full asking price, then the deal is going to work with me, whatever discount I get for it. So I'm not looking for a deal where I have to squeeze to get the deal. I've already got the deal at the asking price. Now what I'm doing is I'm looking to just basically knock off the margin that we know the estate agent put on because they're expecting people to put an offer on a property. So I'm just looking to get back to that number again. I'm looking to get back to the vendor's expectations. So don't be greedy. That's the greedy shark. And then the other one, and this is possibly the worst shark because it is bad for you in terms of your ability to sleep, your ability to have a long-term property business. It's bad for your tenants and it's bad for our industry. Do not be an unresponsible landlord. Don't be that shark. Don't be a bad landlord, the ones that you see on the TV program. You have responsibilities. Know them and act on them. And if you don't know them, get training. There is the NRLA, so the National and Residential Landlords Association, that hold training. I am qualified under the London Landlord Association, even though most of my properties are now up north. And I encourage my landlords who have a number of properties to go through this because it's just good practice to know what is your responsibility. I said to you earlier about the bad letting agents. If you don't understand what constitutes a legal tenancy, you need to be trained. You need a letting agent to support you. But if you don't know if you've got a good letting agent, how do you know if that letting agent is supporting you without the knowledge? And that's why you need to understand it. And as I mentioned before, that's why we have the pre-purchase property checklist as something that is available to all the clients. So I hope in this episode I've been able to explain to you just some of the sharks. There are builder sharks, there are insurance sharks, there are mortgage sharks. Well, not so much, but you know, they are much smaller, probably with less bitey teeth, although builders can be pretty sharky if you're not careful. And don't be put off, because while I'm saying these are the sharks in the property sea, there are sharks out there in every part of our lives. And we know that because you see the programs on the telly. But they hover around anything financial, any form of investment advice. You really need to understand what you're getting into, because the promise is that you will get rich quick. And that suckers you in. That's when they've made their first jab and they know that there's blood in the water, and then they just follow you. So be really, really careful. Far too many shark analogies here. Be really, really careful. Understand what you're getting into. If you've got any questions, give me a call. I frequently have conversations with people to help them understand the deals you're getting into. Have I seen anybody come to me and get in a good deal? No, I don't think I have. Actually, most of the people that have come to me must have had a question in their head. There must have been something at an unconscious level that they were worried about, but they couldn't articulate it. And that can be, we've spoken about this before. If you don't have the language to ask the questions, then you can't ask for help because you can't formulate the words. So if you've got any deals that you're worried about, book a call. Let me have a conversation with you. We can unpack it. And maybe we're going to find that you have got a great deal going ahead. Well, I did speak to one client, and I spoke to you about this before, and I spoke to her, and it was a great deal, but it was going to stretch her financially. It was a good deal, but not at the right time because of the amount of money that it would take. So you really have to look at this. It can be a good deal, but the wrong time. It could be the right deal at the right time, but equally, any of these factors have to come together for you to be successful at this. And this is why so many people aren't successful at property investment. This is why so many people, if you talk about it, they have a very negative view. And it's simply because they're not trained. They're not supported by professionals, and they've got caught by the sharks. So I hope that I've been able to put some whoosh into your property investing, into your property investing awareness, I would say, this time round. So telling you what to beware of. And what we're going to do next week is talk about buy-to-lets, just looking at the simple stuff. It doesn't have to be complicated to invest in property. You do need to know what you're doing, but it actually can be fairly straightforward. Vanilla. There's nothing wrong with vanilla. Vanilla is the foundation of everything. Once you get your vanilla deals in place, you've got that cash flow, and then you can build up from there. So please subscribe so that you don't miss any of these episodes as part of 12 talking about So You Want to Get Into Property. Do join the community. You'll find the links below in the podcast so that you can do that. And I look forward to speaking to you again next week. Thank you very much for listening. My name has been Vicky Washay, and this is a Wealthy Life podcast. And we've been talking about sharks, yes, because of my love of scuba diving, but also because I just wanted to flag up to you that when you get involved in any form of investment, and we're talking specifically property investment, but whether it's crypto, whether it's stocks and shares, whether it's trading, whether it's buying commodities or bonds or property or paintings or cars, there will be people out there that are only in that business because they see an opportunity to attract people to an idea to get rich quick and then separate them from the money. In any one of those investment opportunities, you need to be sure that you have an honest expert that you are working with. Everybody I work with in my team, I have worked with for years, and I would trust them. And this is what I would say to you. When I think about my mortgage brokers, when I think about my investment advisor, when I think about my letting agent, would I have them come to my house, eat dinner with my grandchildren? Would I let them stay overnight in my spare bedroom? Yes, I would. I would. And if you feel like that, now don't get conflated with liking, because I might like you and be prepared to go out for a meal with you, but to have you sleeping in my house overnight, that's a different level of comfort and trust. And I remember always using that as a measure. Do I trust you? And how can I tell if I trust you? You might be very good at lying. How can you tell if you trust me? It's a feeling. And so therefore that question, would you let me come and stay at your house in your spare room? Now, that doesn't mean to say I'd come, because I don't know if I trust you because I haven't met you. But can you see what I'm saying? If you trust someone, you feel it. But don't be confused with if you like them, because lots of these sharks are incredibly likable. They're Disney sharks. They smile and they dance, but a shark is a shark. So thank you very much for listening. Please make sure you subscribe. Please leave a review, and we'll speak again next week.